Hello, everyone. We're here again. I'm Joseph Awad, the founding partner of Awad Baker.
My name is Veronica Sewnarine, one of the medical malpractice attorneys at Awad Baker.
Hi, I'm Alex Awad. I'm a senior associate at Awad Baker.
Hello, everyone. So today, what are we going to talk about? How about we start with you, Alex? You've been doing this for how long? About 10 years now?
Just shy of 10 years.
Okay.
9 years.
And over a 10-year period of time, you've been in a number of very high-level, prestigious law firms in the field of personal injury litigation. Now with another one, Awad Baker. But that being said, how about telling us, after 10 years, do you think that your work in personal injury has had any effect on you yourself personally?
Definitely. It has definitely impacted me personally, even just from getting in the car in the morning to changing batteries on carbon monoxide alarms in my house and putting alarms that connect to my phone so I get alerts about what's going on at the house, to getting second or third opinions from doctors, from seeking out board certified doctors who had residence and were trained at certain schools, even to trickling down to the veterinarian care that my dogs get. I'll pack my dogs up and drive them 8 hours to a board certified veterinary clinic in Manhattan versus someone who's not as qualified, where I live. It's also definitely impacted me. Since about 2018, I have not used any talcum powder products. I don't know if you've heard about cosmetic talc litigation. Cosmetic talc litigation has to do with cosmetic products, especially baby powder, that contains asbestos. I've not used any products since then.
Well, did you have experience in that field?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience in the field of talcum powder litigation and give us a couple, 2 or 3 suggestions or insights to how that has affected you or anybody else that's aware of what's going on in that.
So I'm sure a lot of people have seen commercials for mesothelioma litigation. If you or a loved one are diagnosed with mesothelioma, that means that there is an extremely high likelihood that you were exposed to asbestos in your life. Traditional asbestos cases, we call them occupational exposure. It's when someone is exposed to asbestos in work, whether they're working on insulated pipes or they're working on brake pads that contain asbestos, or there's a lot of military exposure as well. With cosmetic talc, you're talking about non-occupational, non-traditional exposure. So within the last decade or two, we've seen a lot of females come forward to law firms and say, hey, I have mesothelioma. And people said, well, that's weird because you're a homemaker. You worked in the home. You never worked outside of the home. And you're not, in these jobs where you get traditional exposure. So what's going on? What was going on is that they all had cosmetic talc exposure, whether it was through sprinkling baby powder on their babies or sprinkling powder on themselves. Apparently in the 80s, powder was a big thing, a fragrance powder too. Even like high-end brands of talcum powder. And if you've ever seen or used powder, you see that it leaves a cloud of dust in the air and you're breathing that in. The problem with talc products is that when you go down into the earth and you go down into the mines, that you cannot, talc and asbestos are intertwined. It's very extremely difficult to separate the two. They naturally occur together. So when you're mining talc from the mines and then you're putting it through and putting it into a cosmetic product, oftentimes there is asbestos in there. One of the biggest takeaways from representing individuals, mostly women, but also males, but mostly women in cosmetic talc litigation, is that it was, kind of crazy to look at it. We had the big tobacco litigation where we saw that, all these big tobacco companies who usually are competitors got together and said, hey, even though we all compete, we all have a common interest of making money and deceiving the public. So the same thing happened with big talc. A lot of the cosmetic industry giants came together, actually in New York City, and said, hey, let's fund biased research, let's suppress critical research of us, and let's campaign and manipulate the public, the FDA, and let's keep our product out there, because even though we know there's a safer alternative called cornstarch, let's just keep using talc, even though we know it has asbestos and that we're specifically marketing it to women who are putting it on their babies. And by the way, With asbestos exposure, you don't get mesothelioma right away. It could stay in your body for decades. It has what they call a long latency period. So you're having plaintiffs come in their 60s, 70s, 80s who were exposed back when they were infants, decades earlier. It's a very nasty disease. It's a very, harsh to say, it's a death sentence.
So I have a question. So then why wouldn't the companies just use cornstarch instead of the talc if cornstarch is safer?
Just like with a lot of what you often see in these themes is that it's called profit over people. It's cheaper to do it that way than to do the right thing. That's another common example. I don't want to get too off course, but I get really hyped about this, is the Ford Pinto case. The classic Ford Pinto case is Ford made a model called the Pinto in I think it was the late 60s into the 70s, design flaws. One was that they had the gas tank in the back of the car so that when a car would get rear-ended, as they often do and predictably do, it would essentially create a bomb and blow up. On top of that, on top of your fiery coffin that you're driving around, they lacked reinforceable doors so that when you did get rear-ended, the doors would jam and you would become trapped in the car. And Ford knew about this, knew about the risk, and then they said, well, let's take a look at it. Well, they did some analysis and they said, well, if we were to recall all the Ford Pintos out on the market, we could fix it for about $11 per car. But you know what? $11 per car, I think it turned out to be something like $120 million fix if they wanted to fix everything. But then they calculated, well, let's predict about 2,000 deaths and serious burns a year. And if we pay each family like $200K per dead family member and maybe a little less for serious burns, we'd only be paying about $50 million. So 200 million or 120 million to 50 million. Let's just pay out lawsuits instead of protecting our consumers.
So were these companies actually testing the talc for asbestos prior to using it?
Oh, Veronica, I'm glad you asked me that because you're gonna get me hyped up about that as well. Yes, they were testing it. They knew about it from the literature, and then they were testing it. They developed their own method to test it that they knew was insufficient to find detectable asbestos. And then the FDA came along and said, hey, you know what? This seems kind of weird. We may want to step here and regulate. And then the big talc industry got together and said, oh, no, don't worry about it. We will self-regulate using this method, knowing that the method was insufficient to detect asbestos. And in fact, the telling part of it is that the test does not require no asbestos. It just says no asbestos detected. So they knew exactly what they were doing. And that's also why we get into the range of punitive damages with these kind of cases, the profit over people, where it's so egregious that we say, not only do you pay an injured person for their pain and suffering, we also want to send a message.
Yeah, the message is to the for the community at large.
Yeah.
To the companies, don't ever do this again to our community, okay? And to be a deterrent to it, we will, as a jury, award X number of dollars in punitive damages so that the community is protected itself going forward. All that said, Alexandria, I'm going to ask Veronica the question. So when should somebody call a lawyer?
As soon as possible. So there are statute of limitations, which are time periods by when you're allowed to commence a lawsuit. So sometimes people wait too long and that statute has passed, the time period has passed. So my suggestion always is to contact a lawyer right away. As soon as you feel that feeling that, hey, something feels off here, something feels wrong here, give us a call. I always tell our clients it doesn't cost anything to give us a call. Sometimes people who can't afford a lawyer are sitting there in their homes thinking, I don't have the money to call a lawyer, so I just won't call. That's not the case in personal injury. Give us, especially at our law firm, give us a call. We will assess the case. The consultation is free. You don't ever owe us a dime if we don't take your case. So I say right away, just give us a call and let us assess it.
In your experience in terms of persons who have occupational injuries, but these are injuries that are related to construction sites, men and women who are electricians, plumbers, carpenters, iron workers, glass people, all of the trades that help build these great buildings that we find here in New York City, that's for sure, and throughout the state. Have you had any experience as to what takes place from the insurance company's perspective or the defendant's perspective the moment somebody's injured at a construction site?
Yeah, well, the moment someone is injured at a construction site, the insurance company already has a team assembled that comes in to collect evidence, to investigate, to collect favorable evidence to them. If it's not favorable to them, how can we cast enough doubt to take some of the blame off of us? They're taking pictures, they're doing interviews, they're doing anything they can to clean up the scene of the crime, so to speak.
Okay. And so how does calling a lawyer help out an injured person in those circumstances?
Well, calling a lawyer helps out because attorneys can give guidance on how to fill out work accident forms, fill out statements, and they can even go to the scene and take pictures and do interviews with witnesses when, those witnesses' memories are still fresh, evidence is fresh, things like that.
So that goes back to the sooner you call someone, the better off you are in terms of protecting your family, yourself, or otherwise in these types of situations.
Yes, I can't think of a time where not calling an attorney sooner would benefit somebody.
The sooner you call us, because just like the insurance companies have their investigators at the scene, the sooner you call us, we could have our private investigators and our team on the scene to do photographs or videos that we need, gathering the evidence that we need that's beneficial to our case as well. Because remember, the insurance companies are gathering evidence, but it's evidence that's beneficial to help them defend their case. They're not gathering the evidence that will help prosecute and litigate your case. That's what our job is. So it goes back to what I said, the sooner you call us, the better it is for you.
If you walk into your office, the walls are plastered with awards and accomplishments. There are also a bunch of awards on the windowsill. And I know you've held a lot of office shifts. You've been in a lot of positions behind the scenes with legislation, things like that. You've been a super lawyer, I think, for most of your career. What has been the greatest accomplishment? What has brought you the biggest satisfaction in your career?
I would say Trial Lawyers Care. Trial Lawyers Care was the largest pro bono effort in the history of the world. And it had to do with us personal injury lawyers representing more than 1,700 families after 9/11 to obtain compensation from what was created by Congress as the compensation fund for the victims of 9/11. I had a large role in it, relatively speaking. There were certainly others much larger, the president of the National Association, our president of our state association, and others, but I was designated to teach all the lawyers on Long Island in Suffolk and Nassau County how to handle a case. Brought it very much close to home. In the end, lawyers generally put in more than 100 hours per case, sometimes 200 hours in the representation. All of our fees were donated. Very proud of that achievement. In the end, we were able to distribute $2.2 billion to more than 1,700 families of people who died there. We did it all for free. Unfortunately, the insurance industry, the large real estate industry, the healthcare industry, the pharmaceutical industry did their best to make sure that the word never got out that we had done such a remarkable feat under such dire circumstances. We're proud of that, and I remain proud of that to this day. I did hold a lot of officerships. Part of that was serving as a operative in Albany to pass legislation on behalf of our clients and things. One of the most famous pieces of legislation was a case that I started here in New York City called the Laverne Law. That helps cancer victims who have had medical negligence committed that delayed the diagnosis of cancer well beyond the very short statute of limitations of 2.5 years, we got it changed and provided access to the courts to all victims of cancer malignancy cases. The statute of limitations starts with what we call 1 year date of discovery. I found out I've got this disease, and I now have reason to believe that there was medical negligence more than 3 years ago. You now have access to that. And I guess the other great accomplishment is at year's end. These days it's changed because there's so much following on Facebook and all that. I love it when my clients who I was able to help in years past continue to contact me and tell me how they're doing and how thankful they are for the new life that they were given with the economic security I was able to procure for them, either in a jury trial or at the court or at the appellate court, or by reason of negotiation and settlement.
So, Joe, you're very passionate about what you do, obviously. I've spoken to you several times and seen you exude emotion upon speaking about the law and all that you've done. So you're very passionate about it, but I have an interesting question. How do you feel when it comes to suing doctors? Do you ever feel bad about it? Just tell me a little bit about how that feels.
Well, the snarky remark is, yeah, I feel bad about it because I'm representing a patient who didn't get reasonable care on a particular day and has now had their life turned upside down. But your question should be taken. Listen, doctors do a lot of good work. They save lives. They take care of us. They were tops of their class in high school. They got through inorganic chemistry in college, which a lot of us didn't. And they are generally out there trying to help people with their health issues. So do I feel bad about it? And the answer is no, I don't. And the reason for that is, look, medical negligence is not anything different than just a lack of reasonable care under the circumstances. And what does that mean? Well, that generally means somebody didn't do their job in a reasonably careful way on a particular day. Medical negligence is no different than a car crash case. Our driver's out there, that driver's been out there on the road for 20 years, 30 years. He's traveled hundreds of thousands of miles. On a particular day, he or she was not driving their car with reasonable care. They were looking for something on the seat. They were distracted by talking on the phone. They were not obeying the rules of the road. They've caused injury. In our country, in our government, you have to be held accountable. And the thought is the reason why you have to be held accountable is because you have insurance on your car. And it's best to spread the cost of that injury that you caused, okay, to a person because you didn't do your job correctly on a day, than it is for that person and their family and others to absorb that injury. And doctors are no different. In their walk of life, they do they take care of a lot of patients, but if they're not doing their job on a particular day, it doesn't matter why, they're just not doing it, and the patient is hurt. The patient is not, under our system of democracy, supposed to be absorbing that injury, particularly since, just like in car crash cases, there's large amounts of insurance that have been purchased. And the insurance company has used those monies, those premiums, to invest in the stock market. And then with their investment in the stock market, they buy all those big skyscraper buildings that you see in the big cities. And so, in 40 years of practice, we've never taken a dollar from a doctor's personal savings or account because there's insurance there. So I turn it back to you because you work on all these medical malpractice cases, Veronica. Given what you see on them, do you have any feelings about this?
So the way I feel about that is that, yes, doctors do good, but they're also humans just like all of us. And as humans, we're not perfect. We do make mistakes. And that's why there's insurance there to step in when they do make those mistakes and to provide compensation to the victims, the patients who have now been injured due to that mistake. So I don't feel bad suing doctors. I feel upset when the insurance companies just won't tender their policy to a patient who has suffered an injury as a result of the mistake of a doctor. You know, a lot of times we sue doctors, and at depositions, you can see the doctors are physically upset by what they did, but they're prepped to answer questions a certain way. And at the end of it, it's not even the doctor who says, no, I don't want to settle the case. It's the insurance company. It's their decision and it's their money. And so we don't go after the doctor's personal property or assets. It's their insurance companies. And it's the insurance companies that are defending this case to the end of it. It's not really even the doctors. So I don't feel bad suing doctors. My only goal is ever to get compensation for the patients, the person who's actually suffered the injury here.
So June is National Safety Awareness Month. That means safety in almost any aspect of your life. Workplace safety, for example, wearing hard hats at work, wearing harnesses, keeping an eye out for trip and fall hazards. You know, traditional summer safety, pool safety, compliance with local pool fence laws. You know, summertime, we have a lot of barbecues, a lot of, drinking under the hot sun at the beach, drinking and driving safety and awareness.
Well, with the summer coming up, there's lots of parties, there's lots of gatherings and outings. I would just like to add to that, like the safe driving. If you know you're going to be drinking, having more than one drink, just call a cab or arrange for a designated driver to pick you up, because you never know when too many is too many, when you've had too many.
When you talk about safety, it's not only those considerations, but I think we have to add to that. If you're a property owner, if you happen to own a home, are you maintaining the outside of your property in a reasonably careful way? Do you have railings for the stairs outside? If you've got stairs outside, you should have railings. There are most suburbs these days in New York have ordinances and regulations that require escape mechanisms for fires. Have you looked at that? If you're in the second floor of your house and there's a fire below, what have you thought about how you're going to get out of the house? Business owners. I mean, the owners of business, they invite us in to do business on their property, and we want to exchange money for their goods or for their services. But, that places a responsibility on them. How about parking in a parking lot and then walking into that business? But to get there, you've had to go over 4, 5, 6, 7 different potholes that are right there in the parking area that could easily be fixed. Are there other ways of thinking about safety?
And to add to that, as a homeowner, I have a particularly long sidewalk in front of my house that makes me sweat, because now that the temperature is getting warmer, I have a lot more neighborhood kids walking by. I have a lot of adults walking by. I have people with dogs who are dragging them on leashes going by, and you have to make sure you keep your sidewalk free and clear of hazards. And I also live in a nice neighborhood with nice tree-lined blocks, but those trees have roots that upend, push up the sidewalk. And now you have to deal with a lot of tripping hazards. If you walk by my neighborhood now, there's a lot of homes that just got their sidewalks redone and got trees cut back because the roots were coming up and creating a hazardous and dangerous situation that they could not keep in that condition. As Joe said, it's a good time to go out, do a walk around your property, make sure your fence security is up to date, make sure your sidewalks are up to date, so you can have a nice summer without creating risk of injury.
So Alex, speaking about safety and safety awareness, why don't you tell us one topic about safety that might not be so known or recognizable to people?
Because that extra layer of insurance comes from your insurance company, does not mean that they're your friend. The second you put them on notice, that first layer of insurance might not be adequate for your injuries, so you're putting them on notice that you may come up after that policy. insurance is your friend until they're not. So even if you think you're dealing with a friendly insurance company that has protected you for years, you should still consult with an attorney as soon as possible to help get that tender of the policy or as much as the policy as possible. So you've gotten a lot of large verdicts. What do you do with a large verdict like that?
Well, there are verdicts that exceed millions of dollars, if not tens of millions of dollars. And what happens to those verdicts? If they're enforced and there's enough insurance money there, that then is turned over to our clients. Now, why would they need millions of dollars? Well, in many cases, their ability to earn a living has been taken away or severely impaired. Think about somebody who's in their 30s, 40s, or 50s and's got 20 or 30 years ahead of them. Those last few years earning the most amount of money, and that's all taken away. Well, that has to be taken into consideration. There are clients that need custodial help. That is to say, they can't take care of themselves independently for their activities at home. That money is there because health insurance doesn't cover those types of injuries. Okay, health insurance covers injuries to the body. It doesn't cover necessarily payments for having an assistant for the rest of your life in your home, whether it's 2 hours a day or it's 8 hours a day or it's 24 hours a day. That has to come from somewhere, and that's where those large verdict monies go to. In addition to which, we always read, and it's always published, that one particular person got a huge verdict against a pharmaceutical company, a major hospital, or otherwise. But the impact of what occurred affected not only that person, but her or his immediate family, whether they're children, whether they're spouses, whether they're mothers and fathers. There are people that are all affected by that. And those large verdicts go to help stabilize their life. The last thing that we need in this country today is to have more and more people turn to the government to support them, whether it's in medical care, health care, pay for those bills, or to support them in their housing, or to support them going to college, or the absence of their jobs. Taxpayers they're at a breaking point, right? And in our state, in New York, we're at a breaking point. And so we are able to take that load off of the taxpayers and off of the government and place it in private industry, private insurance industry, in which this has all been planned for. The insurance companies can predict with actuarial probability how many people are going to be hurt on a particular job building a building in New York. They can predict. Medical malpractice insurers for hospitals can predict how many times negligence is going to take place at the hospital, and to that degree, the degree of the severity of the injury, permanency of an injury, and otherwise. And so all of this has been taken into account. It's been financially accountable for. It's permitted by the states to be done. Profits are made. God bless them. Let them make their profits. But when it comes time to paying large verdicts, there are sources there. I don't have any hesitation in turning that money over to clients. I've not seen in the last 15 years any client really waste money. A lot of times that's, the idea that they're going to waste money. Most people end up making sure that their home is paid for. Most people put it away responsibly into, there's access now to Charles Schwab. You can go to Charles Schwab and be in the stock market and be somebody who never had to deal with money, and they get tremendous financial advice, and they become able to manage their monies. That's what I have to say about large verdicts.